Well, everyone, Moore's Law does not apply to your wages, but it certainly does apply to prices, because Nvidia have unveiled their new line of high-end cards, and my god, are they high-end. But it also came at the same time that grievances are being aired publicly in a story that's been breaking over the last few days. It's quite a fascinating thing, and certainly if you go to a lot of the further comment that's been provided on it by, say, the likes of Linus Tech Tips, this is something that Nvidia have kind of always been known for.
Yeah, it's just I think Nvidia are starting to, and this definitely started with like the 3000 range. They were kind of okay for the 2000 range, but the 3000 range of graphics cards, that was when everything kind of started to go wrong, right? That's when it's like, hang on, crypto manager here, hang on, who are graphics cards for? Because they're not for you and I anymore. Hang on. And then people started to like lose their faith in Nvidia in a little bit of a way and go, oh, maybe you're not the nice friendly company that make our games look very, very nice because of technology.
Yeah. But behind that, Nvidia have seemingly some of the best engineers in the business.
For sure.
And that's the thing, where Nvidia do make absolutely goddamn incredible products. But even with this, in terms of how they're slicing and dicing things, there's actually a drama in that as well, regarding the two different versions of one of their cards. There's a lot to get into. We'll do the drama first, right? So this was quite something where EVGA spoke to Gamers Nexus, and EVGA basically said, right, we're getting out of the graphics card game entirely. No, we're not going to do stuff with Intel or AMD. We are out. Now, of course, EVGA do sell other products, right? They sell motherboards, they sell power supplies, but by revenue, graphics cards were most of their business. However, the actual profitability on other lines of business, such as power supplies, was in and around 300% higher than the cards. Jeez. And some of this is because of, well, just what Nvidia actually like to work with. And really, it's quite a lot. And for some of the context here, like, EVGA was one of the largest add-in board suppliers. Like, they were massive and in the high-end game with, like, the Kingpin cards. Like, I remember when the Kingpin cards were coming in, of course, via Mr. Kingpin. Like, seriously awesome stuff. But what would basically happen is Nvidia would start setting price ceilings. Now, if you're an add-in board partner, a price ceiling is a bit of a problem, because what if you want to juice that card to the tits, just go absolutely mental, and, you know, make the card that Kingpin will consider as his baby? Mm-hmm. Well, with a price cap being set, they're not able to do that. And obviously, those would be higher margin cards because they are appealing to a significantly smaller, more niche enthusiast audience. Now, things then got a little bit more funky when Nvidia started doing the Founders Editions. Of course, Nvidia selling a Founders Edition directly, that obviously that's like cutting out, you know, a whole stage in the process. So they have far more room with their margin there, which basically means that their add-in board partners are really put on the back foot, right?
Yeah, especially with like recently enough, the like last couple Founders Editions, people were like really kind of, I guess they liked the Founders Editions more because they had like this air of prestige that Nvidia were sending out to them, and like putting like the way they like the colors were so nice and so pretty and so clean. Like, that is what a card...
And sometimes a blower is what you want.
Yeah, and like, that's what the card looked like. That's what that card is. You see, I mean, that's obvious when you see anyone with like a 3090. Like, most times I've seen a 3090. I was about to say in the wild, I've not seen one in person. But, you know, like in images, people holding them, it is the reference. It's the reference card. It's the Founder's card. Instead of, you know, like, 'cause I'm thinking about like the card that I used to have from MSI, and it was clearly an MSI card. All the colors all over it. But that's not what you think of. Right? You think of the Founders Edition, and that's just kind of winning the branding race. But you're winning the branding race against your own partners, which means obviously they're going to be cut out of it. Yeah,
and I think for Nvidia, it's really them trying to step up a little bit and be more seen. I mean, to the stage where Jensen is even doing, you know, obviously it's Nvidia's own style of that, but I'd say is a little bit inspired by the classic Apple style product presentation that I think at least popularized in people's minds by, Steve Jobs coming up and saying, hello, this is an iPhone, right? That's really what they were trying to do, like between the announcement of RTX and all of that stuff. and really like building up Jensen's profile as a CEO, as a notable person in the games industry. Even got the little bobblehead of him. All of these things,
right?
Yeah, and the jacket, the jacket that's almost a meme at this stage. Mm-hmm. All of those things are to just say, hey, Nvidia, go to us, right? So it's very unsurprising. We'll get into some very interesting numbers that we've got later on the percentage of Steam users that are using an Nvidia card versus an AMD.
Yeah, I mean,
suffice to say, this is working for Nvidia.
Yeah, it's working for Nvidia, but it's also in a case where you'll start to look at some of the data that we'll show later on from Steam, and it is full on just, are Nvidia leaving gamers behind? Are they starting to, are they starting to think they are Apple? And that's kind of one of the big vibes I got from that showcase recently, the Beyond stuff, and how they're doing with the products. It's very much, oh, you think you are someone? Oh no, that doesn't bode well for us.
Yeah.
Sure doesn't.
Now, going to EVGA, some of the issues that they've had are, to be honest, truly surprising. Them not being alerted of pricing, basically until consumers find out.
That's brutal.
Can you imagine being an add-in board partner? You've got to set up like the manufacturing, the engineering, all of this stuff, and you're not even crystal clear sure on what pricing is going to be. That is a pretty damn insane level of disrespect. And there's been other instances. I know there was the whole drama with Hardware Unboxed. There was some stuff as well with Linus. I believe it was like, Linus and Co. kind of being a bit on the defense for Hardware Unboxed, and Nvidia, like, honestly just going completely insane. Yeah. So, yeah, they don't have... In many ways, they don't have the best reputation. Indeed, I even remember with proprietary things the developers could use that would work in their cards. There was even a whole drama about that a few years back. So Nvidia, incredible engineers, incredible products, definitely pricey products, but they're a bit of a heel, right? They just are a bit of a heel. Now, what's interesting here is EVGA apparently were making up 40% of market share in NA. So...
Crazy.
Yeah, like, that is kind of crazy. And EVGA, like, if you had to RMA apart or anything like that, EVGA were commonly known as being very reasonable for that. I actually had to RMA an EVGA card, like, years and years ago, and it was a pretty damn simple, quick, easy process, right? So they are definitely going to be a loss for consumers. As for them, well, I think they're just going to end up going a bit more trim. They said they're not expanding into more product lines, so it seems that they're going to be more focused on motherboards, PSUs, that kind of thing. They are higher margin areas. They said they're going to support staff, but obviously, like, there will be people who don't have things to do. Like, think about what Kingpin does. Well, they're not going to be doing graphics cards anymore. So this is definitely a loss for the overall market. I've watched a lot of videos of people in the know, people saying like, hey, Linus, is this just how they are like to EVGA? Surely they wouldn't be like that to Asus, given that Asus are a massive company. And I think in between the lines, no, they're like that to Asus as well. So
Crazy.
On the head of this very rumbly situation, we get the new 40 series cards. And the big thing there, for this new architecture named after Ada Lovelace, is a 2 to 4x improvement over brute force rendering. Now, that's not saying that there's 2 to 4 times the horsepower. No, it's because of DLSS Super Revolution, DLSS frame generation, and NVIDIA Reflex. All these things running on the new hardware just mean the DLSS 3 is multiplying performance by up to 4x over brute force rendering. Now, what is interesting, though, is that because this iteration of DLSS is like full frames being generated, is it going to end up being a motion smoothing? Because this is the sort of thing that is not particularly intuitive, but you could have a 240 hertz monitor that will have a lower latency than a 360 hertz monitor, because it actually turns out for these things, it's more than just the refresh rate. So, in a situation like this, as with, motion smoothing like things, is this going to be a little bit of a knock in, in input latency?
Yeah,
it could be the case that there could be a tiny amount of that, but they just think it's not really that much of a problem, given they have a few other things like reflex, I believe.
Yeah, to explain that super basically, or super quickly, it's effectively, if you're generating a frame from just information and you're not actually reflecting the user's information, then that means, say if you've got a game that's running at 30 frames per second, you could easily generate a between frame and then it'll look like 60 frames per second, but your input will only be pulled every other frame that you see, which means your game will be playing at 30 frames per second, but it'll look 60, and that'll look nicer, assuming the frame generation's right, which they have all this AI stuff going on that they've done with DLSS to kind of actually make that happen. But that will be the case of, no, you'll end up maybe stepping backwards. Now, I imagine this will be the case of they're never going to say, okay, well, you should play your games at 15 FPS and we'll get them up to 60 through the smoothing. It'll be, you want like the visual of 120, but you can only get 60 brute force, so this will actually work. So this will be like for 4K 240, where you're not going to get 240 frame per second rendered anyway. So there's a little bit of that, but it's still fundamentally, this is the same shit your TV does that ruins how your video games feel to you. This is not, there's a lot of different part of that as well, but it's the kind of thing of, because I remember it was The Force Unleashed 2, I think, was a game that did that. It ran at 30, but it looked 60. And there's all these the entire thing was, this is not something the games industry should be doing. Was the time taken then, but then it was really shitty technology doing it, so it'll look better now.
That's it. I'm imagining Nvidia will say, oh no, trust us. Yeah. We have this sorted. Also, Nvidia Reflex is there.
Yeah, well, that's the thing where Reflex is just lower latency for existing frames. You can't get input from frames that aren't actually being
rendered.
I
feel like what they're going to say is we will take a slight hit here, but our other piece of technology will give you a gain that will kind of knock it out. And I suppose another use for this, which isn't exactly a use that I think a lot of people are really going to have, because unless they buy one of these cards and have a ridiculous monitor, because when I look at these DLSS things, that's ideal for, say, a 3060, a 4060, right? A more affordable card where if somebody is brushing up against 4K 60, let's just say they're getting, between 52 and 68 frames a second, and they just want it to to feel like a solid 60, they could maybe use something like this to kind of patch up the frame rate. So that's certainly interesting. I think for a lot of people, the proof is in the pudding. I think one of the good things, though, is with Gamers Nexus, with, Optimum Tech also does great stuff. Linus building a goddamn lab. The quality of testing that consumers are going to be able to have access to here to actually validate what these features are like is honestly just incredible. So we will find out. There's 35 current and upcoming games. For a few of the big ones, you've got Microsoft Flight Sim, Black Myth Wukong, Stalker 2, Cyberpunk 2077, which certainly, if you want to go uber ray tracing mode, I think it might be the game for one of these cards. Warhammer 40k Dark Tide. Yeah. Now, again, it's a bit weird that it's like, oh yeah, DLSS. Usually something that really kicks in and is super handy in the more budget side of things, even though the cards that you'll have access to this feature on are bloody expensive because it's only on the 40 series. Now, one thing that they have done that, to be honest, I think is just awesome is RTX Remix.
This is actually, I almost thought I was dreaming when I was actually seeing this report. I'm like, this is such a great thing to be doing with just, hey, oh yeah, we put a load of we've seen people put a load of ray tracing into the original Doom and stuff. Hell yeah, we've got a load of engineers. Get something on the go.
So if this was the 90s and I was a marketing executive, I would call this nostalgia vision. Because the way you think about your experience playing a game as a kid and you re-remember it in your mind's eye. And if it's Doom, you're probably not going to make it super HD. But if it's a game like, say, Oblivion or Morrowind, you are what's in your mind's eye is probably closer to a crazy modded version of it, because that's just how we remember. To me, what this is really doing is just saying, hey, this is going to look how you remember it. So it's goddamn incredible what it does. Basically, a whole bunch of stuff with textures, seemingly with just the normal maps and stuff as well. Ray tracing just puts that in. And seemingly this is a fairly easy to use process. Here's a quick look at Mountain Blade. I mean, yeah, damn. So when it comes to like actually making those textures look right, the actual materials on them looking right and kind of behaving as they should, they basically just have, you know what? I'm just going to say AI. They've trained shit. They've got stuff worked out. Basically, that's the DLDR for what people would actually need to know, unless you're actually a modder. Some of this was shown off in Portal RTX. Certainly, I mean, that lighting there to the bottom left, that does feel incredibly realistic. Now, what is interesting, though, is that there were some RTX remasters that we heard of via the GeForce Now leak. The GeForce Now leak that, of course, is really proving to be accurate.
I mean, at this point, everyone is just aware that was all literally true.
Yeah.
It's just finding out which of those are placeholders that are actually not cancelled and are actually going to be made is the last question. Because everything else, almost every other project that's been announced is like, oh yeah, that was on the GeForce thing. Or like, yeah, that was, you can see why they took that down so quick.
Yeah. Now, this is only working DirectX 8 or 9, so that'll kind of let you bracket in like the generation of games that we're talking about. Of course, BioShock is one of them, and there is going to be a BioShock RTX remaster, and in fairness, yeah, BioShock is a game that would work well. They're also doing some of that, though, for Mirror's Edge and for Arkham Knight. So this is all very cool, and you might be thinking, wow, this is great. Incredible performance, amazing new technology. How can I get this? Well, there's 3 cards. One of them probably should be called the 4070. This is almost a bit like some of the years when, you know, Tim Cook had came in with Apple, and Apple, they were just like, how far can we push this up? What? The Pro Max is the one we're like selling them? What? How do all these people have all those money? Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, okay, so to get into it, the 4090, this is the big boy. £1,679. So I guess we're getting hurt on import. Whereas for Team America, $1,599. They are saying that it is up to twice as fast using the same amount of power as the RTX 3090 Ti. Here's a relative performance chart. Then again, definitely do actually wait for the real testing to be done.
Yeah, I see there.
I mean, look at the Cyberpunk graph.
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
Yeah, and I'm just sitting here. What does new RT overdrive actually mean? What is that? Are you trying to say that? Oh yeah, well yeah, obviously that's them going. Oh well, the 3080 Ti wouldn't have done very well on this all new stuff because the tech doesn't exist. Like, that's technically right in terms of here's the great experience. The experience will be better, but it's like I said, it's not brute force rendering. It's not 4 times faster.
There's architecture improvements that allow for this.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the 4080, then so the 4080 is the one that I think, honestly, no, most of us are still not affording whatsoever because this, like they're saying, look. This is twice as fast as the 3080 Ti, using nearly 10% less power. So that also seems, I mean, pretty damn awesome. There are 2 versions. There's a 16 gigabyte and a 12 gigabyte, but you'll begin to notice there are weird things. I mean, the 12 gigabyte has more performance than the 3090 Ti, which is pretty damn incredible. But if you look at the CUDA cores, the 12 gig model has got 7,680 CUDA cores, while the 16 gig has just shy of 10,000 CUDA cores.
Those are not the same cards with different memory. That's not what's happening here.
So this honestly does feel pretty odd. I mean, even if we're going to look at their Darktide performance, you can see their 3080 Ti. So like that's the difference between these 2 greens. Like that's 2 things that are called 4080. So I don't like it when things like this are done.
No, that is intentionally misleading consumers through a technicality.
Yeah.
More or less. That's what I would be happy to call that, unless they have some definitional proof that they could provide that's not the case.
So the 12 gig model is $899, while the 16 gig model is basically $1,200.
And also you can tell at the pricing that, you know,
those are above.
An extra 4 gig of, you know, VRAM does not throw the price of a card up that much. It hasn't in the past, so clearly there's something else going on here.
So what they're essentially doing is they are carving out more space in that top end of their market for the enthusiasts. It could be the case that, I mean, like with the iPhones and all of that, perhaps, I don't know, as the millennials start to have a bit more money, these companies are kind of realizing, like, fuck it.
Squeeze them. Like,
We can just squeeze them. And
Yeah.
it seems like it actually does work, because the higher end things, I mean, as shown with, Apple over the last while, the higher end things do actually sell really damn well. I mean, you can get an iPhone that is basically the same price as like an entry level MacBook Pro, which is more expensive than an Air. Like, just to show how the kind of notching up of the premium pricing just like keeps on going and going and going. So what that is really odd is this. So they're saying it's 4080, 4090, and they're not presenting these as like one new generation. They're presenting it as the RTX family, which now spans 2 generations. And I do wonder if this is a little bit of just saying, yeah, it'll be a while before you see a 4070. Now, of course, it always has been the case that the higher end stuff has came out first, with the lower end stuff trickling in afterwards. I just have to wonder, how long it will be, and what sort of time they'll have burning off all of that, previous series stock.
Yeah, that's the thing where it's going to feel a little bit bad for consumers whenever you're sitting, oh, well, what do you mean there's no new card for me? But as long as the early adopters actually sell their old stuff, which you'd imagine they're doing, right? It's almost like graphics cards are becoming more like phones, where, people don't buy a phone and then keep the phone and then buy a whole new phone. They'll trade in, or they'll sell, or they'll like do something with, say, and I'm surprised this hasn't actually happened yet in like a bigger way, but the way, phone carriers offer 2-year plans for phones. Because that's the kind of thing where I was thinking, oh yeah, well, hang on. I have, what have I got, an iPhone 10? I'm like, well, oh yeah, well, I actually wouldn't mind the iPhone, the new one. And then I went, wait, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, but I'd be paying it over 2 years. Oh, but that's still a hell of a lot of money. Okay, my phone is fine. So I imagine we're almost at the part where graphics cards will nearly be doing that, or at least be subsidized by, say someone buys a 3090 and then they want the 4090 or 4080. Well, they're going to be losing in this short enough period of time. They'll be losing out, say, $600-700 of value because they're just like want the new thing. Hopefully that's where like that will be a subsidy in a way for like people in the lower end of the market. That's what I'm kind of hoping for when it comes to, could I say grab a 3080 once the 4080s are out and everyone's kind of, oh, well, we've got this stock, we need to dump it. Is that something that's going to happen? Maybe not in the UK, but I'd hope so.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it looks a little bit bad for the lower end of consumers.
So there is a thing, though.
Yeah.
One thing that has been absolutely exploding in the fintech world is buy now, pay later.
Yeah.
And that's something I feel like we should probably talk about. I mean, my bank Monzo basically has that built in now.
Yeah.
The likes of Klarna and all of those things. And, looking at the actual, some of the statistics, which I was literally listening to some content on this yesterday, and I don't remember the stat, but I remember that it was absolutely bloody enormous. It was like, oh yeah, we have 140 million users. And I think those are maybe going to be the people who will be just being like, yeah, I'm just going to buy this graphics card and spread it over a while. So there is that too. And if you actually want to do some like-for-like comparisons on the launch RRP of cards, I mean, I think this is telling, and I think it shows that perhaps because some people were still willing to buy cards at the very large markups that we saw on the secondary market, and I mean with retailers too, that they maybe think they can notch it up a bit, because a 3090 cost $14.99, right? A 4090 is $15.99. But where we really see the increase is, a 3080, $6.99. A 4080, well, $8.99 for the cheapest, basically $1,200. That's like almost doubling for the thing that has the same-ish designation.
Yeah, it's basically getting in on the scalper market, because all that scalping proved to them, wait, hang on, people will pay more for our goods. Oh,
we'll sell pre-scalped cards.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening.
Pre-scalped for your convenience. You don't even, it's brilliant. You don't even have to give somebody money in eBay. Nvidia will sell you a pre-scalped card.
And that's the thing, where like, that feels terrible, but it also shows the market value is there. It's just the kind of thing where is that, that's going to feel bad for people if all of that's like, oh, hang on, what do you mean? Because, whenever manufacturers don't know what people are willing to buy for it, they'll sell it for lower, which means a little bit of a tighter profit margin and stuff. But that's ultimately, in that world, that's better for the consumer. If you can get a graphics card that's really strong for $400, $500.
Yeah.
But now it's like, well, sorry, the cost of entry to modern video games, and this isn't going to be true because everyone knows that everyone can look at the Steam stats we're about to go into and go, okay, well, we need to make our game scalable. We're no longer in the graphics are the end all and be all of video games. We're largely out of that in terms of, what's that? Our PS3 game will run at 10 frames per second. Doesn't matter because the trailer we can show that we can render on our big farm will be 60, and that'll get everyone to buy it. People are actually interested in, does this run well? Is it optimized? As evidenced by PlayStation's efforts on their PC ports to go, yeah, God of War runs in a fucking toaster, work away. You're like, okay, good. So it's not like the price of entry is going up, but the price of entry to the culture, the price of entry of going, oh yes, I am allowed to post on r/battle stations because I've got a new graphics card, as opposed to, you don't, and I don't know, what's that? We can see that's a 2070 Super in your PC. Fucking peasant. But that's the idea of like, the entry to the culture is going to be there, but entry to the experience of playing games won't be.
Yeah.
Won't be,
so
hopefully.
when we take a look at some of this data then, we go through the series. 10 series is 19.66%. 16 series is 17.62%. That was a weird series, wasn't it? 20 series, 11%. 30 series, just shy of 20%.
Oh, yeah.
And for the laptop 30 series, 6%. I think the laptop, my laptop had a 3070 in it. I think those were like a...
That was not a 3070.
nice... Yeah, it wasn't a 3070, but... They were like, for laptop performance, like a pretty decent notch up.
Yeah.
Now we've got to, of course, mix that in with resolution, where we see that, 1080p still is the largest resolution. Now, one thing is Steam is all across the world, right? Take titles like CSGO, popular all across the world. I do wonder if you were to go and look at, say, North America, which I believe is the largest consumer goods market on in the world, would we see a higher percentage of 1440p cards, a higher percentage of 4K cards, 4K monitors?
Yeah, you would definitely cut maybe like, this is a number completely off the top of my head. You'd probably cut like 20 to 30% of that 1080p right out if you stop looking in South America, if you stop looking in like China. If you stop looking in like, especially like Eastern Europe as well, as soon as you narrow it down to Western Europe and North America, you're going to see, that's going to cut out 40-50% of the 1080p overall, just because that's how the world, like the consumer goods market works.
Yeah, but there's a lot of 750 Ti's in the mix here.
Yeah, and God bless it, that is one of that might be the best graphics card ever made.
Yeah,
honestly.
Yeah,
did
easily.
PCIe power and running like esports games at 1080 60. What a demon! What a demon!
Yeah, so overall, these new cards, I think, are only really applicable at 4K. Yeah. Or maybe 4K, 4K high refresh rate, 3440 high refresh rate.
1440p to 4040p 240 hertz.
Yeah.
Because we're getting to the point where 1440p 144 is still fine in like esports games on even small enough cards. Because I was surprised whenever I grabbed that 2080 Ti. I was like, wait a second. I can play a lot of games at 4K 60 on medium. Yeah. I thought that was a lot harder to actually get to. Holy shit, that's actually interesting. I basically had this idea that this was this like unreachable ideal. I'm like, wait, no. And then that immediately made me think, who needs a 3090? What the hell?
Yeah, so I guess what I've been thinking here is they are trying to invent new things that people could value that they didn't value before. And I'm going to bring Apple into this because I think it kind of is relevant.
Yeah, they are going full Apple, right?
If in 10 years you told me that half the world would have an Apple butt plug because somehow Apple made it and convinced them that this is actually the best form of biometric monitoring with all of these incredible health benefits and just all this crazy shit, I'd be like, yeah, sure, whatever. It's Apple. They can invent a new little market space, right?
Like they did with
they pushed with iPod, like they pushed with iPhone. Tablets, they're still a market leader there. Smartwatches, they're a market leader there.
With the new Ultra, where you're like, hello, we've taken smartwatch from, oh, you want to look like you have money, to, oh, you're out in the desert.
Yeah.
Well, this is going to be good for you. You're like, oh, that's a good extension of that.
And what previously was a hyper niche product that, I would have known of because my dad would have had those big Garmin GPSs.
Yeah.
Like, it literally was a massive GPS watch for hiking stuff. Now that's available, something looks like this.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But it's also a thing of like, we've got this tech, we've got it working well, and now we have this nice little, packageable thing that we can put a good user experience around, and then we can go show off everybody the value of this. And now people who previously didn't think, I mean, before the Apple Watch, and I know there were other devices, but I think Apple ended up pushing that segment the most, at least in the popular space.
It's them and maybe Fitbit for like the fitness tracker stuff.
How many motherfuckers were tracking their heart rate or their blood oxygen or any of these things?
Very few.
Right? How many people thought, oh, atrial fibrillation? I don't think about that ever. But now people are like, oh, this is a nice little insurance policy.
Yeah,
I guess, hey, in fairness to Apple, it is actually pretty damn cool tech. All right, fair play. I think with Nvidia, one of the reasons they're pushing ray tracing is because it's actually just fucking cool. In fairness to them, imagine being an Nvidia engineer working on the sorts of R&D that they're doing. That would be absolutely incredible.
Yeah, hard to.
But with RTX, right, the hardware ray tracing, that is them trying to normalize and expand a segment of interest that they have a disproportionate advantage in because they have that R&D budget. So that now is why people are talking about the ray tracing and stuff like that. Whereas if Nvidia weren't kind of going in here, spending all that R&D to expand the entire space that is ray tracing and then convince consumers that ray tracing is a thing that they should want, then we'd just be, being like, oh, we're going to brute force, just get more horsepower in the cards and there's not going to be a proprietary thing, whatever. Stuff like that, or even just shadow play.
Yeah,
back when that was like a, and the NVENC encoder and all that.
That's actually a really good point, because that's one of the things now where I thought about, that was one of the, I didn't think about it too hard when I went from 970 to a 2080, even oh yeah, I now have better recording options.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really actually interesting. That's more efficient. It looks better. That's a nice little value add. And then the same with, I was doing it fine because you could backport, because they technically sort of, I don't want to say they lied because I'm not sure about that, but they technically didn't tell the whole truth when they introduced, RTX voice and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, RTX voice, you can only use this on an RTX card. And then immediately within a day of it releasing, someone went, you can just bypass that skip and it'll work on your 970. And I was like, sweet, okay. But that's a nice little value add. Where it's oh yeah, they're never going to get to the point where it's okay, well, you can check your heart rate variability on your watch and then it'll tell you if you're going to be sick before you actually notice any other symptoms. It's that's the kind of thing where that's a crazy thing of biometrics and widely available, widely important to literally everyone who's got the money to put that on a watch. But the graphics cards are never going to get to that point. But then, they might have all of these little things. They're oh yeah, well, you definitely want the high end thing because it brings you this new version of what you're going to do for your own kind of stuff, especially with all this AI things of are we going to hit a world where there's some crazy shit where you can AI upscale a texture on the graphics card level? Is that something they're actually probably looking into at the minute? And then you go, oh well, do you want to hook that into Dolphin? Oh, you want to emulate Twilight Princess on the Wii? Or hey, you want to play Super Smash on the GameCube, but all the textures are upscaled automatically on the graphics card level to 8K or whatever else, because this will be in the far future. And that's a tech that's actually this is why I'm happy early adopters are throwing stupid amounts of money at graphics cards that they don't need, because eventually in the future I'll be able to make use of that stuff. And that's where I'm kind of find it hard to be angry at them for this, as long as they actually do eventually go, here's a 4060 and it's great.
Yeah. The actual tech in itself is really cool. Yeah, ray tracing, really awesome. These are things that we're totally for. It's just there's a obvious, there's an obvious change in the market that we cannot help but point out, because it does bloody well affect the vast majority of people.
And everyone noticing it too. Yeah. Everyone's noticing. Everyone is seeing these prices and going, but who are these for? These aren't for us. Are you even trying to serve us as a market anymore? And people are onto that. So I hope they find a way to either drop that and go, hey, here's the 4050 Ti that's absolutely kick ass. We'll play your 1440, 60 esports games, or 1440, 144 esports games all day long forever for $400, $250, $300.
The iPhone 6S problem.
Yeah.
The joke was the 6S was supported for such a long time and basically would work completely fine and solve all your problems for such a long time that people are it's been 4 or 5 years and I don't feel like I really need to upgrade my phone. Maybe I'll replace the battery.
Yeah,
and they're and they're just but we really want you to spend more money, buy a new phone. Yeah. So overall, I think this is the perfect meme. The perfect meme to end today on. It's very true, and that is how it is. There's a lot of money to be made on the top percent.
The world is very weird, and we're no longer like, as PC gamers, we're no longer a niche. That's the thing that I think we're going to learn the bad parts of that before too long.
Yeah.
We're going to go, oh, we're not the niche. Oh, what does that mean? Oh, does that mean there's like the top end of money in this place is now crazy and we're going to be kind of annoyed by that? Oh, no.
There is now the luxury niche at the top end of the commodity market for like PC related goods is just larger and larger and larger. And it's large to the point where this is now what makes business sense. These cards are almost certainly higher margin. I mean, even if like, higher margin,
and impossible to compete with,
somewhat lower quality. Yeah, harder to compete with. Nvidia are trying to be as well moated as they can. So that's that situation. Let us know what you think. See you next time.